So those of you attending, thank you for coming in. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes to let some other people get on board. You should see on your screen our presenters from Sheppard Mullin, Ashley and crew. How are you guys?
Doing well.
Great. How are you?
Wow, it looks like you're someplace official. I don't think you're not in the home office, huh?
Home today. So weird.
All right. And Alan's with us. Alan's going to be a disembodied voice. He's not going to be on video today. Alan Bush. Alan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing, Kevin?
Good. Thanks, Alan. We'll get going in just a couple of minutes here, probably around 10:03 to 10:05. So we're just waiting for some folks to jump on, and then we'll get going. I hope everyone had a beautiful weekend.
Nice weekend.
Nice
Yeah,
to have-
we have a sailboat. We were on the bay, so it was nice to be out there.
Nice.
We did something yesterday we haven't done in a year, and we actually went to the movies yesterday, which was quite a shock.
What did you see?
We saw A Quiet Place.
Oh, was it good?
It was just being back at the theater was just felt different. Good, but different.
It's like being back at work. Everything feels good but different.
Well, hopefully it's all going to be on our rearview mirror.
Yep.
And it was a little cold over the weekend. It was chilly on the water.
Yeah. I think the throngs of tourists in San Diego for Memorial Day were probably somewhat disappointed with the weather.
Yeah.
But it's always like that. It's always May gray and June gloom, and people who live here know that, and people who come here are shocked.
Yeah, I think you're right. We were looking back at pictures from past Memorial Days and looking at some of the pictures. It was I didn't see a lot of sun.
Yeah, it's always gray.
Those of you just jumping on, we're going to get going here in just a couple of minutes, probably between 10:03 and 10:05. Thank you for taking the morning on your first morning back from a very, I was going to say long, but it seemed to be a very short Memorial Day weekend.
Short, long weekend. Well, that's part
We
of the
need
work,
more of them.
right? Is we're always working.
I don't know what day the 4th falls on this month, but that'll be another chance for us to get out and enjoy ourselves.
I think it's a Sunday this year.
That's no fun. Do we get the Monday off?
I think you get the 5th off.
Or Friday. What do you want, Friday or Monday?
I don't know.
Both.
Day after. The whole week.
Yeah, just the whole week.
Maybe we'll take both days off.
Sounds good.
Those of you just jumping on, we're going to get going here in just a minute. We're just making sure everyone's on. We're not going to penalize anyone for coming on early, so we're going to be pretty prompt. And why don't we go ahead and get started? So my name's Kevin Carroll. I'm the Executive Director in Tech San Diego. This is one of the events under our Transition and Growth series. Coming out of the pandemic, growth is always going to be an issue, but there's still some lingering transition issues that we're going to have to work through. So we're going to do a series of events. This is one of them. And, one of the things we thought about is we have lots of members in Tech San Diego, and I was bringing in a new member, Ignite Visibility, and I was talking to Alan Bush, one of the principals over there, and was telling him about our series, and, he mentioned, geez, transition and growth, that's kind of, some of the things we do and some of the marketing challenges we offer with companies oftentimes boil down to transition and growth, and the more I talked about it, Alan, being Ignite Visibility, being a new member, said, geez, we'd like to sponsor that series. And so we obliged and welcomed Ignite Visibility on. They're a new member of Tech San Diego. And so with that said, I'm going to introduce Alan Bush. Alan's one of the principals at Ignite Visibility. He's a thought leader and earned media speaker, SEO. He's also a UCSD instructor and an expert consultant. He has over a decade of experience. One thing that Alan can say is that he has held the director role in multiple agencies, working on hundreds of clients, both Fortune 500 as well as startups. He has co-created and co-hosted 2 internet marketing podcasts with international followings. In addition, Bush has been a guest speaker and panelist at several marketing events and teaches 3 accredited courses on search engine optimization, web analytics at the University of California, San Diego. At Ignite Visibility, Alan is VP of Strategy and works on some of the company's largest accounts, working as the head liaison with business development, operations, and the SEO team, setting the strategic direction for the company. So with that, I'm going to introduce Alan, and I will go off camera. I want to make one logistics note is there will be an answer. You can see in your little box there's a place to do questions. We will be monitoring those questions, and most likely we'll answer those at the end. Unless it's really critical, I may come in and say something, but we're going to wait for the questions till the end. There's also a chat function if there's any logistic issues you're having. Sarah Spiva will be on that. But with all of that said, I'm going to introduce Alan Bush. Alan, it's all yours.
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot. That was a great introduction. I feel I have to live up to that. My name is Alan Bush. I'm the VP of Strategy at Ignite Visibility, one of the premier full-service digital marketing agencies in San Diego. We're actually an award-winning agency, and we do digital marketing services from SEO, paid media, social media marketing, email, CRO, conversion rate optimization, Amazon, digital PR, creative website development. You can probably do it. This is something that I just wanted to join in on because this does hit home. We had to pivot into this whole world last year, and thankfully, working at an agency that does digital marketing, we were able to pivot pretty quickly. And even before it was formally announced, Ignite announced that we would be working remotely ongoing, and we still are. So this is a presentation that's going to really hit home for me, and I think that this is really good to know how we're going to get back to what we call normal, or what is normal. And so I had a conversation with a variety of people, a variety of clients that are pivoting their strategy and how they embrace the workforce again. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the hosts. This is Samantha Hardy and Ashley Hirano, who's going to take it away here.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us this first morning after a holiday weekend. Ashley and I are actually in our office for the first time together since March of 2020. So we are celebrating this work from home webinar by coming to work, or back to work webinar by coming back to work rather. So I think, all companies have the same basic question, which is, what will the world look like now? We have all learned to have employees work from home, possibly employees that we did not think could work effectively from home. Companies have learned to pivot. Companies have invested in technology to work from home. And more importantly, employees have gotten used to working from home and like it there and might not want to come back. So the big question here is, what will the new normal look like? I think we can all agree it will probably never look like the old normal. There will definitely be employees will expect more flexibility and work from home. And what makes the most sense might depend on your company. So there are now really all of the options you can think of. You can ask people to come back to work eventually, obviously. Some companies are thinking of going remote full time to save the costs on having a lease and the costs that come with an office. Some companies are going to be hybrid, but on a set schedule. Some companies are simply going to let their employees decide what days they want to come in the office, want to stay at home. Some companies will have a bifurcated workforce. They will say this category of employees or these positions really are most effective in the office, and these other categories must work from home, can work from home. But that newfound flexibility and all these options bring with them their own issues, some benefits, some drawbacks, and just some things to consider. Among those things are you as a company may think that one thing is preferable, and your employees may have a different idea about what is preferable for them in either direction. We certainly have employees here who would rather stay at home for the foreseeable future, and employees who could not wait to get back to the office as soon as we are allowed to do so. It will result in having to make changes at the work site. Some of those changes might be physical. Right before the pandemic, everyone had gone from separate offices to communal office space. That was the trend, shared office space. We all work together when we are collaborating. It's better to be together. And that is obviously now less COVID friendly and maybe not what employees want or what workplaces want. You may need to change your office configuration or bring in sanitation equipment. You may need to change protocols as to what employees need to do before they can come to the workplace. And of course, unfortunately, COVID is not gone. We will have continuing people who are sick, people who need to be out, people who don't know if they're sick and are exposed and need to get tested or to quarantine, people with childcare issues. We still don't know what schools will look like in the fall. Kids under 12 still can't be vaccinated. So there are a lot of outstanding questions that, although we are edging towards a new normal, are still not answered. You know, obviously in San Diego, there is increased availability of vaccines. Over 50% of the eligible population has been vaccinated. It is very easy to get a vaccine in San Diego. I had to go online to get an appointment for my 12 to 15-year-old, and there were plenty of appointments. So employees have lost the excuse of being not able to be vaccinated if that's what they were relying on. Everyone who wants to be vaccinated can be. That does not mean everybody wants to be vaccinated. Employees are choosing not to for a variety of reasons. Some people truly can't for medical reasons. Some people have religious objections, and some people just aren't comfortable with it given the expedited nature of it. So we will have employees all over the spectrum with how they feel about themselves being vaccinated and also other people being vaccinated. Do you have employees who themselves are vaccinated and concerned about other employees who are not? Obviously, the CDC has issued new guidance. Fully vaccinated employees can interact together without masks, inside, outside. We are set to exit from the tier system from a state perspective on June 15th. That will look a lot more like normal. Cal OSHA is revising guidance for that. We don't know exactly what that will look like yet. This is a good time to be talking about this because we need to start preparing, but also think the guidance is going to change a lot over the month of June. And whatever we plan to do now, we might have to replan when we see what the government has in store for us. And of course, at any time, things could change, the numbers could change, variants could change, vaccine effectiveness could change. So one thing all employers need to be prepared for is whatever the new normal looks like, there could always be a new normal just around the corner. You know, there are a lot of issues. The first thing to think about is managers. You know, I think a lot of managers have had trouble adjusting to how to supervise employees from home. Managers have traditionally kept tabs on employees by watching them, and they have all had to adjust to supervising from home, now adjusting to employees coming back, and particularly difficult to adjust to a hybrid. How do you impose consistent management standards, levels of accountability when you've got some people in the office together and some people at home where you really can't keep tabs on them to the same extent? And of course, there was some lessening of responsibilities when everyone was home. Bringing people back to work means tracking vaccines, enforcing mask rules, enforcing distancing, sick leave if people are out. We had to watch a 21-minute COVID safety video and go through policies and check off that we had reviewed them to come back to the office today. All companies will have different requirements, but that is now adding a burden to managers at the same time as the added burden of figuring out how to supervise people at home. So it's a lot to be having a hybrid. And again, you have to manage employees who don't want to come back. There will be decisions to be made about who is allowed to stay home if you have asked people to come back. So the question is to return or not to return, or to return partially. And that will depend on a lot of factors that are specific to your workforce. The first question we ask after what do managers think is, what do your employees really think? This will obviously vary company to company. Tech employees are probably more used to working at home. Many of your employees may have worked at home, may have worked remotely before, or more used to it. But we pulled together some general surveys as to what employees were thinking generally. Nearly half would not return until they were fully vaccinated. 35% would insist on their coworkers being vaccinated as well. That is a particularly tricky one when you have one set of employees refusing to come back to work until another set of employees does something that they may well be uncomfortable with. So you have employees with directly conflicting safety concerns. A third of employees want mandatory mask policies. Obviously, many employees will complain about the masks and find them unnecessary and burdensome if everyone's vaccinated. And then a full 10% of employees at this juncture said nothing would make them feel comfortable to come back to the office, no matter what. And then there are questions about whether and when you can make people come back, when you'll need to accommodate people who don't want to come back, when it's a choice versus something that needs to be accommodated, and we will run through all that. A different survey found slightly greater, 53% wanted a mandatory vaccination policy before they would come back, and 71 would want employees to be required to wear masks. School-age children, interestingly, want to return to the office. I would have perhaps expected that the parents of school-aged children had childcare issues and actually needed to stay home and wanted the flexibility. But apparently after 14 months,
We want to come in.
some large, my children are teenagers, so I'm not sure they're school aged. Ashley has little kids at home. She apparently is happy to come back. But I think after 14 months and a school year and a coming summer, parents with school age children actually want to come in and have a break and be with adults. Then other employees liked not needing to commute and the flexibility. The most missed thing was coworker interactions. An amusingly missed thing was that 22% of people miss office snacks. So when you are preparing your office for return, make sure you have good snacks. Apparently that's what your employees are coming back for. It's the best enticement. You can send out pictures of your snack bar. So you've got what the managers want, what the employees want, and then always in a business setting, you have to think about what your competitors are doing. So, here's some headlines about what companies are doing. Some companies have obviously, like Twitter, pretty famously, have announced that all of their employees can work from home forever. JP Morgan did the opposite. They are requiring people to come back by July. Google is hybrid. Spotify is work from anywhere like Twitter. It is all over the map, with, as you might expect, tech companies being more likely to allow remote work or more likely to allow a hybrid. And so if you are wondering what your competitors are doing, if you're wanting to set up a work environment that will help you recruit or retain employees, tech companies for the most part are letting that happen, letting employees work from anywhere, which is really different than letting them work from home. That in and of itself is different, right? Work from home, but you need to be in the city. We might have meetings, we might have presentations, we might have things we need everyone to come in for, is a different level of flexibility from you can go work on your ranch in Montana, you can work from literally anywhere. And the choice to let people move out of city, out of state, also, brings with it different complicating factors that we'll discuss later. So the first question is, are you going to require people to return? What are the questions that you should think about in making that decision? Obviously, what type of business, what those employees are doing, what your business needs are. Can your employees actually do their work from home effectively? And you know the answer to that now because they have been home for a long time. Again, can you even hire employees if you're making them come into the office? Or can the work be done from home so effectively that qualified candidates will insist on staying home? The job market has become tight for a lot of employees, particularly for employees coming into the office. And you might have to think about perks that you didn't have before to require and encourage people to come to work. Are you in a location or in an industry where health guidance is encouraging, or even in some places, perhaps mandating some work from home? Are you having trouble supervising employees, monitoring performance? Employees who are writing software, you can see whether the software is written. Employees who are taking tech support calls, you probably monitor how many calls they're taking. There might be other types of employees where it's quite difficult to monitor whether they are being productive from home. And so again, it may be different for different parts of your workforce. Are employees online in a situation where you can see that they're working, or do you really not have any idea whether they're at the park with their kids or online where you want them? Can you even bring everybody back full time in your space? And a very important question is, what do you want to do cost-wise? Having an office is expensive, right? We have all learned now that maybe we don't need the space we had, any space, as much space, paying for parking, paying for the snacks, paying for everything that's here. Although if you are going to have that space, if you're locked in a lease, if you have those costs anyway, is it more expensive to allow continued work from home? Are you paying for your office lease, paying for that space, and also paying for your employees' internet, extra printer paper, work from home situation? That might cost more. So in a very real way, you have a choice now as to what is most cost effective for your business. And that decision might be on a rolling basis as leases come up, as you see what employees want to be doing. But just to bear in mind as you go along that both of those options have actual monetary costs. Further considerations for returning. Again, do public health orders have restrictions, and can you accommodate them? What will the restrictions be post-tier system? I don't think we know that yet, but you might need to take a look at your workspace, the physical workspace, and whether you can accommodate whatever those restrictions are. There may be different restrictions for vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So what you can and can't do might depend very specifically on post-tier restrictions, what your physical workspace looks like, what your employees are doing, whether they are vaccinated, how your employees feel about coming back. So this is a very fluid decision. Something some people aren't thinking about is commuting. In San Diego, fewer people take public transportation to get to work, but some people do take the coaster or take other means of public transportation. There are some employees who would be okay coming back to work, going to their office, people are wearing masks, but may not be comfortable getting to work the way that they do that. If the tiers are listed and masks aren't required on the coaster, or they don't know whether other people are vaccinated on their public transportation. So a complaint you may get that you didn't anticipate was, I get that the workplace is safe, but I can't get to work. It's a super long drive. I need to take the train and I don't feel comfortable on the train. Is that something you're going to accommodate? Just a factor to think about. And then of course, the flip side is, how do you deal with the employees at home? We've all been home, more or less, for a year. So we have learned to engage. At the beginning, we had at least, I'm sure you all had, Zoom meetings and Zoom cocktail hours and Zoom lunches. And then everybody got Zoom fatigue. And for the most part, people stopped doing the extra Zoom calls just for fun and did their work. Did that lead to less bonding? Probably it did. Are employees less engaged when they don't feel connected to their coworkers or to an office culture? Part of engaging employees is office socializing and casual socializing in the office. So, how do you really promote that sense of teamwork if you are going to allow people to work at home when it's no longer required, or if they are a hybrid? It is hard to increase the performance of lower producing employees from home, and harder still when some of them are at work. I have had a lot of clients ask me, well, if someone is performing productively at home and somebody else isn't, can I require the employees who I don't feel like are productive at home to come in and allow employees who are productive at home to stay at home? I mean, theoretically, you can do that, but like anything else, any decision that's discretionary is ripe for a claim of discrimination. If the productive employees who you're telling, you know what, you're productive, you're engaged, you're fine at home, okay, all happen to be male, all happen to be Caucasian, all happen to be younger employees who are more tech savvy and better able to work at home. And the less productive, lower producing employees who you can't really put your finger on what they're doing, or you can't engage, or you can't get to be quite as productive as home, who you may want to bring in, are they part of a minority class? Are you opening yourself up to a discrimination claim by requiring just those people to come in? Something can be theoretically lawful and still bring with it legal issues that you didn't necessarily anticipate. Hopefully we have all dealt with the wage and hour issues of employees at home by now, but it is hard. It is hard to make sure that employees are tracking time accurately. If you have non-exempt employees, they have to take meals and breaks on the correct schedule. I myself hop on and off the computer in kind of short increments when it's easy to work, because it's always set up. I get distracted, a kid asks for something, then they're busy, so I'm just going to finish up this thing. It's hard to track your time when you live and work in the same place, and when you're working in short increments as you think of something as you walk by your computer, but you can still be tagged for off-the-clock work for that happening. And also the expense reimbursement, again, for employees. Before work from home, expense reimbursement was a big source of lawsuits, crazy lawsuits. Ashley and I had a lawsuit once where employees were provided cell phones by the company, fully paid, and were told to come to work with their cell phones fully charged so they could use them. And they sued for the electricity because they had to use their work provided charger to charge their work provided home or work provided phone from home with their electricity. So I do think as we continue to have people at home, we will see some kind of outrageous reimbursement lawsuits, anything you could think of, electricity, etc. So, and finally, just, is work from home something that you're going to have to do again to recruit people? So we talked about employees who have moved. People have moved all over. People have moved to other states. That creates hugely complex issues. I always think, one of the hard things during the pandemic was, I go home to visit my parents in Montana for a week, and I'm working from there. I'm not a Montana employee. I'm not going to tell an employer that you need to figure out how to comply with Montana laws because someone went home for a week. We all go on vacation all the time and work from vacation. What about the employee who went to shelter in place in Montana for the first 3 months. Maybe the employee who's been there now for 14 months because you haven't made them come back, but they're still a California employee, they have a residence, they're just waiting it out in Montana, getting closer to an employee in a different state. Now you tell employees, look, we've decided that people can work remotely permanently. That employee pretty clearly is a Montana employee at this point. You are allowing people to not have a residence here, to take up a permanent residence somewhere else. You may be hiring new employees with the complete understanding that they will never work here and never had a residence here and live and work full-time in another state. That actually requires you to know and comply with the laws of every state where people are working remotely. Every state in the country where somebody has moved and is working and you're allowing that to happen or you're hiring them, you must apprise yourself of employment laws. They need to file taxes in the state where they live and work. Not only state laws, but local laws. You know, we all know within San Diego, there are city and county ordinances that affect employers. Sick leave, you know, there are just a patchwork of sick leave laws in California. So imagine having employees in every state and having to figure out the patchwork of county, city, local, and state ordinances about sick pay, leave, minimum wage, living wage, for every single employee that you have. So again, you may decide to have a remote workforce, but require people to be in the city, to be in the state. It is a big consideration to allow people to work permanently from other states. And again, the reimbursement and what is a reasonable amount of reimbursement, particularly when employees could come into the office. In California, you need to reimburse for anything that they need to do their job. If you have an office set up for them and they're choosing not to come in, probably it is still something they need to do their job, but you know that becomes somewhat of a different analysis. The cell phone is a good reminder. This has always been the law, but the law inexplicably requires that you reimburse for cell phones, even for employees who have an unlimited cell phone plan that they had in place before they came to work for you. That is the same amount of money every week, regardless of whether they're using it for work or not. What the law actually requires is that you pay the percentage of the unlimited plan that they are using for work. So if they are using their unlimited plan half for work and half for personal, you have to pay for half of it. I do not think any employer in California is doing that because it would be virtually impossible to track that. We do recommend as best practice to pay something and have a policy that says something like, we estimate that this is a reasonable amount of reimbursement for the use of your cell phone, but if you feel like it's not, please let us know. But that is an expense that often gets missed, that there is clear legal guidance on. There is no such clear guidance on the internet, but I don't know why that would be any different for employees who are at home. And again, they're printing, they have electricity, anything else you could think of. What happens if you decide to be flexible? A lot of employers are just saying, look, we want the best. We want to recruit and retain the best. We are going to allow a hybrid because that is what we think the new normal is. That is what the future of the workforce looks like. And I agree, actually, for what it's worth, that I think that is the future of what the workforce looks like. I think we are not at a stage where everybody will be remote and there will be no offices. There is too much to be gained from teamwork and collaboration and supervising your less productive employees and all of that. Sorry? And snacks, yes, and snacks, very important. But there will be people who prefer to work from home, and there will be employees who you really want, who don't live where you live. So it may be just to recruit a good workforce generally, or to recruit a particular person or team, you're going to have a hybrid. That, I think, is one of the hardest things to manage. Out of sight, out of mind is a big problem. Do you have employees who are at home who feel like they're left out? That seems like more of a problem if you told them to stay home. If you decide, these employees are coming in, these employees are staying home, and then the employees at home feel like they're getting less good assignments, less face time, aren't promoted, have you effectively created second-class citizens? And again, do those second-class citizens happen to be of a different race, gender, age, just by happenstance? How do you promote collaboration? It's different when we are all on a Zoom meeting. What happens if 5 out of 6 people from a team are at work? Are you really going to have that one person Zoom in? People might not have an official work lunch planned, but might all go together to grab lunch. The people at home will be left out of a hybrid workforce, left out of ad hoc socializing, left out of meetings, left out of things that maybe don't seem important enough to Zoom them into, but then become more important. So that is a very hard situation that employers will have to figure out how to manage. I don't have a great solution for that, other than if people are close enough to have them come in, schedule times for everyone to come in. A hybrid workforce might look like everyone's in the office on X days and the other days are flexible. I would encourage some type of structure to make sure that everybody is having face time together. And again, just harder for managers to manage 2 entirely different functioning workforces. If employees are still coming in and out of the office, we are still living in a COVID world. We do still have to have protocols in place for tracking who's vaccinated, tracking who may or may not have been exposed, tracking people's symptoms. Those requirements may be removed by OSHA, but if they're not, and people are coming and going as they please, you still have to have those protocols in place, and it becomes a little bit harder to track. If somebody does become exposed, you don't even know who is in the office. So you do have to make sure that you know who's where at all the time. What do you do about the people who will not come back to work when you decide that that is good for collaboration, for productivity, you don't want to manage a hybrid workforce, etc. So again, at this point, half of the people want to stay home. Why is that? Lots of reasons. Some people are still scared of contracting COVID. They may not be able to get vaccinated for religious or medical reasons, may have people at home who cannot get vaccinated for one of those reasons, or for age. I don't think the science is 100% clear that you can't contract it and asymptomatically pass it to someone else. I saw a news story recently that the vaccine might be less effective for people with some conditions or some medications. And of course, the news and the science will be changing. It may be that we find it's even more effective than we thought, and that fear becomes unfounded. Or it may be that we find there are some populations that it's less effective for, and that fear might become more founded. We just don't know. The reasonableness of the fear and the science is changing. Childcare issues, I think, will persist through the summer. We don't even know what school will look like in the fall. I think we are assuming that kids will go back to school in the fall. Maybe not all kids, maybe not immunocompromised kids. So some employees will continue to have childcare issues and insist they need to be home. Commuting, people don't want to do it, or it's just less effective. Employees who had long commutes may have gained 2 to 3 hours back to their life, their free time, or to their work time. Some employees that have long commutes may truly feel like they're getting more done at home and don't want to come in. Is that a good reason to let them stay home? Again, quality of life, whether it's the commute or otherwise, people are at home. I myself, when I work at home, I take breaks by walking my dog outside. That feels like healthier and better quality of life to me. And maybe I just feel like I'd rather be at home. People are used to being in their sweatpants, not having to get dressed. There's lots of reasons people are happier at home, and we've all just gotten used to it. I think a lot of people didn't like it at the beginning. They missed their coworkers. They felt like there was no break between work and home, and they didn't like it. They felt like they were always at work. And I think people get used to what they're doing. And now people are used to being at home and the convenience. That said, you may well get pushback. And then when people get there, make them come back, they will probably become accustomed to being back in the office. This was my first day back, and I'm going to be honest, I felt a little bit stressed about it for all of the reasons. I had to put on pants that weren't sweatpants and get in my car and pack up my laptop and be around people and high touch points. And then when I got here, I was like, oh, this is familiar and it's nice, and I get to see Ashley and there's snacks, and I kind of liked it. And I think I might start coming in by choice. So remember that people are resistant to change, and you might get pushback, but then once they get there, they might get used to it. One thing that you will need to work through is the interactive process for people who don't want to come back. So this is a really interesting thing, I think. So obviously, the standard for a reasonable accommodation has always been the same. You must accommodate an employee for either medical reasons or religious reasons if it is a reasonable accommodation that does not create an undue hardship on the company. The employee must be able to do their essential job functions from home with or without a reasonable accommodation. And we used to have this same question all the time. Is work from home a reasonable accommodation? And a lot of the time we would say it was not. It's not reasonable because the company would need to invest an unreasonable amount of money in setting you up to work from home. You might have access to confidential employee information, and the company might not have been comfortable with you working from home. The company wasn't set up to manage employees from home. Company just didn't believe, for whatever reason, that the essential functions of this job could be done from home. I think it will be incredibly hard now for any employer to take the position that an employee who comes to them and says, I have a legitimate reason that I need to work from home and I need to have a reasonable accommodation, to say that it is not reasonable, to say that they cannot do their job from home because they've been doing it from home for over a year. I think it will be incredibly difficult to call it an undue hardship. Of course, somebody might not warrant the accommodation in the first place. An employee needs to have a legitimate religious concern or a legitimate disability or medical reason that they need to stay home. Just, I don't want to commute. I don't want to put on real pants. I'm happier at home is not something that needs to be accommodated. So that's the thing to remember, right? Everybody who wants to stay home doesn't need to be accommodated. You don't need to go through the good faith interactive process just because that's their preference. But if they come forth with a disability and claim that they do need to work from home, at that juncture, I think it will be very hard to say no. Of course, the higher the level of risk given your workforce, the things we talked about before, do you have a large proportion of unvaccinated workers in a closed space? It might be hard then to find an alternative accommodation where people come in. But if you have someone who claims concern with contracting COVID and you work in a setup where people are in their own offices, everybody's vaccinated, and that employee doesn't need to come within 6 feet of each other, that might also be a reasonable accommodation. Or there might be ways to reasonably accommodate that employee short of work from home. But I think this will be something that we face a lot now with employees who all of a sudden, it's not a preference, it's something for which they need a reasonable accommodation. And as always, just make sure that you document that you engage in the interactive process. Even if you tell an employee, look, we've gone through the interactive process, we understand your concerns, there is zero risk from a scientific perspective, given our setup and your job of you coming into the office. So we're going to insist that you do that. Document that you went through the interactive process with that employee, because you may need it as a defense in a lawsuit. How to incentivize employees. Ashley, who prepared these slides, is clearly hungry and really likes snacks. So again, lunches, snacks, office parties. We're having a back to work happy hour on July 4th to try to get people to come back to the office at a point where we think, anyone who wants to be fully vaccinated has been fully vaccinated at that point. Let's encourage people to come together. You can give away stuff for people to come in the office, swag. You can have raffles. There's a company called CoStar Group who is anyone who is fully vaccinated and in the office is eligible for a daily prize of $10,000 offered randomly each workday. The grand prize to this raffle is a Tesla or a vacation. CoStar Group apparently has lots of expendable income, and your raffle could clearly be less elaborate than that. But you know, anything you can think of to do to get people in the office, chair massages, manicures, office yoga, whatever your employee base likes. Manicures might sound funny, but Saks Fifth Avenue is actually offering manicures to people who come to the office. One big question is, you know, you're encouraging people to come in, you're doing all this great stuff, snacks, manicures, parties, cocktails, but is that tied to vaccine status? And are you opening up a new can of worms if you are denying people those benefits because they can't or don't want to get a vaccine and they claim it is due to disability, religion, or medical accommodation? And with that, I will turn it over to Ashley to talk about the somewhat fraught topic of vaccines.
Yeah, everyone's favorite topic right now is vaccines. You know, what do we do with them? How do we create a policy or protocols, you know, around vaccines? You know, up until fairly recently, a lot of employers could dodge the question. You know, we don't even have adequate community supply, such that we could require vaccinations of our employees, even if we wanted to, because we have a large percentage of our employees who aren't even eligible to get them or can't find them, or there's just not enough available. But we're at the stage now, as Samantha said, where, you know, any person who wants a vaccination can get one. So it's sort of forcing employers' hands into, okay, now that we know everyone can get them if they want one, do we want to, you know, require it as an organization? And so a lot of companies kind of around this period of time are taking a look at their protocols, their policies, and thinking, is mandatory vaccination something that we want to do, something that we need to do? You know, some employers are still taking a wait and see, but I think at some point, each company is going to have to decide for itself, you know, is this something that we mandate, or do we do something, you know, south of that? You know, the number one question that we get all the time is, can I require my employees to get vaccinated? And the answer is yes. The EOC, the DFEH, all have said, you know, yes, you can. If you want to require employees to obtain the COVID-19 vaccination, you are legally allowed to. But, you know, be careful again in how you implement that policy. Obviously, as Samantha mentioned before, you know, if somebody cannot get vaccinated due to a medical condition or a disability, they need to be granted an accommodation. If someone's religion does not permit them to get the vaccination, they need to be granted an accommodation. So it can't be such that, you know, you get vaccinated or you get fired. You know, there need to be carve-outs for these legal requirements. You know, if you do have a mandatory vaccination policy, you know, obviously, in order to be mandatory, you need to track your employees to figure out who has the vaccination, who doesn't. Be cautious about how you request the proof, how you store the proof. That's confidential medical records. Be careful about the questions that you ask. It's clear that you can say, are you vaccinated, yes or no? Can I see your white CDC card? That's fine. Should you say, oh, did you have any adverse reactions to the vaccination? Or do you have a family member with a medical history that, you know, caused an adverse reaction? Be careful about the types of questions that you ask, you know, around obtaining the vaccination or proof of vaccination, because those could get into, you know, disability related or genetic information related inquiries, which are not permitted, you know, absent job necessity, which is pretty hard to prove. And as I mentioned, when you're storing proof of vaccination, those are confidential medical records. You know, you don't want to put them in any old file. Those should be kept with any other medical records under lock and key and access only with the need to know basis. It shouldn't be such that, you know, anyone can go snoop around and see who's vaccinated. Some employers I know are just creating an Excel sheet that says employee vaccinated, yes, no, card verified by HR, yes, no, and then that's all they have. Even if you can require vaccination, should you? There's a lot of issues that come with, unfortunately, it's a politicized issue. There might be employees who are feeling a certain way pro-vaccination, certain way anti-vaccination. You create the dichotomy within your workforce that could become amplified. Is this a policy? And I know not many tech spaces are unionized, but this can be a point of contention that could lead to unionization. Is it necessary? Do you have a high percentage of your workforce who's working from home, such that you don't need to mandate vaccinations? Or do you have a high percentage of your workforce that has voluntarily obtained the vaccination, such that you don't need to mandate it for the remaining 2%? So it's just a thought process that you should go through as an organization. Yes, we can mandate vaccinations, but do we want to? Do we need to? Is it worth the cost benefit analysis when it comes down to implementing what is kind of a hot button issue right now? And so just kind of things to think through when you're crafting your policy. A lot of clients that I'm working with now are, at least for now, taking the track of, we won't mandate the vaccinations, but we'll encourage them. They're taking kind of different tracks of how strongly they might encourage it. But there's lots of ways to encourage vaccinations. You provide the information, you show the science, you show them that it's safe, that it's effective, that it'll prevent against serious disease and death. And you know your workforce best. You know which messaging will resonate with them. What sort of materials, what sort of campaigns will get the message across to your employees. I know a lot of employers are doing what they can to make it easy to get the vaccine. So I'll schedule an appointment for you. I'll bring in a mobile clinic. I will we'll take a group trip to CVS. We'll all go together and get our vaccination. California does require paid time off for getting the vaccine and for vaccine side effects, but I know other companies are giving extra time. If you have a 2-hour appointment at the county vaccination site, we'll give you the whole day off. Take the time that you need, and that might just be enough to get the employee over the hurdle of do I want to get the vaccination or not. And of course, buy-in from management. Lead by example. Show them your selfie with your little sticker. I know some clients, they create Zoom backgrounds that says I care about my coworkers, I'm vaccinated. Things like that to kind of create a culture that shows your workforce that this is safe, this is effective, and this is something that everybody's doing. Short of mandating it, we're going to strongly encourage it because it's not only good for our workforce, it's good for the community. And you as an employer have an obligation to maintain the health and safety of your employees, but it's also kind of a benefit to you all. You have fewer people calling out sick. You have fewer people who need to self-quarantine after exposure. You have fewer people who might be spreading it amongst your workplace. It's actually beneficial to you to have a workplace that's fully vaccinated or mostly fully vaccinated, just to avoid what a lot of employers went through over the wintertime, which was text message after call after email. Okay, so-and-so is out sick. Okay, who do we need to isolate? What kind of paid sick leave do we need to provide? When can they come back to work? Who needs to get tested? Having a vaccinated workforce just clears out all of that stress and all of those questions. And from a selfish perspective, it's just much easier for employers when you just don't have to deal with that. A lot of companies, kind of as I mentioned, they're doing these incentives to get vaccinated. If you show me your completed CDC card, we'll give you a gift card, or we'll enter you in a raffle. This might be, what you need to get some folks vaccinated, get them on the vaccinated train. But same concerns that we discussed earlier. An employee says, hey, I would absolutely love to get vaccinated, but I have a disability that prevents me from doing so. I'm being denied this gift card solely because of my disability. So they could bring a claim saying, you know, I have been discriminated against, I have been denied this benefit of employment because of my disability or my medical reason or my religious background. So just be cognizant of that. You know, if you have a program, and the EEOC has said it's fine, they just recently issued guidance on this, you know, just be cognizant. If an employee comes to you, you might need to consider offering them that same incentive as well, if the only reason that they can't get vaccinated is because of a protected characteristic. There has been some concern, well, what if I offer, you know, that $10,000 raffle to anybody who's been vaccinated? Employees might say, oh, well, I had to get vaccinated because I feel coerced into it because the prize was so large, I felt like I had no other choice. The EEOC has said that's fine because you're not requiring them to give you medical information, medical background, answer those sorts of kind of invasive questions. If it's like, just show me anything that you got at CVS or just show me your white card, you went to the county. I'm not asking you anything with respect to your medical history, your medical background, your genetic information. I just want to know if you're fully vaccinated or not, yes or no. Then the EEOC has just recently said that that's okay. But these are done, you know, just things that no good deed goes unpunished. You just have to keep this in mind if this is something that you are going to offer as an organization. You know, there's always, we are in California after all, there's always grounds for an employee to make a claim like this. So who is, you know, quote unquote, fully vaccinated? CDC and California both say either 2 doses of Moderna Pfizer or your 1 dose of Johnson Johnson, and then it has been at least 2 weeks since that last required dose. So that is the definition of who is fully vaccinated. And then why does it matter, you know, which of your employees are fully vaccinated? So we all know the CDC just lifted a lot of their guidance, or lifted a lot of their restrictions in their latest guidance. So basically the CDC has said you can pretty much be as normal. If you are fully vaccinated, you can remove your masks. You don't need to quarantine if you have been in close contact, you know, with some exceptions. Obviously, if you come down with symptoms or, you know, you test positive, obviously, then you would need to isolate. They've lifted a lot of travel restrictions. You know, you still need a test returning internationally. You still need masks on federal travel. But what the CDC is trying to do is incentivize vaccination by handing out this carrot and saying, look at all these things that you can do. You can be fairly normal if you are fully vaccinated. California Department of Public Health usually lags a little bit behind the CDC. They're a little bit more conservative, but at least this time they're in alignment. And you know, they say, you know, you can go mask free. You can indoors, outdoors. They still require it in large outdoor groups. And you know, Kalosha, and we've kind of previewed them a little bit, and I'll talk about them a little bit later. They look to the CDPH, and so there'll be many exceptions from their workplace requirements if you can show that the employee is fully vaccinated. The problem here then is, you know, what if some of your workforce, so say you don't have a mandatory policy and you have some of your workforce that's vaccinated, you have some that's not. What do you do with this kind of half-half or 80-20 or even 96-4 workforce? You know, if employees are refusing to get a vaccine, but not for a religious disability medical reason, they just don't trust the science yet, they don't feel comfortable, can you bar them from coming back to the worksite? Maybe. What if you have employees who don't feel comfortable coming into the office if they know that Bob 2 doors down isn't vaccinated? How do you manage, you know, those opposing groups and, you know, meet your obligation as an employer to provide a healthy and safe workforce? You know, there is guidance that says, you know, somebody who is not fully vaccinated is a quote unquote direct threat to the workforce. And that matters when you're doing the interactive process that Samantha mentioned with respect to providing a reasonable accommodation. You know, you can't allow somebody into the workforce who poses a direct threat to themselves or others. But say that person is not fully vaccinated and you throw them in the closet and you put a big sign on their door that says, don't come in,
Hazard warning.
hazard. Is that truly, a feasible, a reasonable, meaningful, accommodation to that employee and to others? And I've had like a lot of questions recently. Well, how do we treat, say we let everybody back, how do we treat the two groups, our vaccinated group and our not vaccinated group? Do we allow our vaccinated groups to go to business travel and we make our unvaccinated employees stay home and show up on Zoom? Is that truly fair? Is that truly equal? Are the people who are unvaccinated who are doing these presentations on Zoom, missing out on the in-person business development opportunities? Maybe they're not, going to be your sales leaders because they don't have the same opportunity. I had a client ask about vaccination zones, which makes me very nervous. But in concept, they would have multiple floors of their office. One floor is for fully vaccinated employees. The other floor is for unvaccinated employees. They're theoretically exactly the same snacks, same setup, same really everything. But upstairs, you can take your mask off. You can have lunch with your coworkers side by side. You can walk up to somebody's desk and sit next to them. Whereas downstairs, mask on, plexiglass, 6 feet apart. Is that truly equal? Does that sort of get into some very creepy and weird feelings about dividing your employees based on their vaccination status? I've had clients ask, well, what if we give out lanyards with a unvaccinated, little sign? I don't know how I feel about that yet. As Samantha mentioned, managers will have to know who is vaccinated and who is not in order to allow them to take off their masks or allow them to, attend certain things. And again, it's all hinging on Cal OSHA guidance, which we'll go into a little bit. But, is that the best way to do it? Do we put up little stickers on doors, saying I'm vaccinated, come on in? And so there's a lot to think about. It's going to be a very interesting world, even, as we go through the summer, even as these protocols are lifted. This is a fundamental question of how do we just treat our employees based on, their vaccination decision. So this is a big one I think a lot of people will grapple with. So let me make sure I'm on time. So presuming you bring people back, you decide you're gonna come back full-time, you're gonna come back part-time, whatever, you nevertheless need to prepare your office space. Go through a checklist. You're gonna wanna check San Diego County, the state of California, Cal OSHA, I keep mentioning them, has emergency temporary standards, which I'll go into later, that will describe very much in detail how do you bring back employees, how do you do that safely. So check everything that could apply to your business. Do we need to screen our employees before they come in with temperatures, with symptoms? Do we have one-way arrows in our hallways? Do we set up sanitation stations? So make sure you have your checklists, make sure your work site is ready to go when your employees do start to come back in. For example, outside we have this big jug of hand sanitizer and some like little plastic thingies to grab the door, which is great for the environment, but whatever. So just think through how you're going to set up your workstations. Do you need to move desks? Do you need to move offices? Will people be coming back to entirely different setups? Samantha highlighted earlier, effective June 15th, assuming nothing substantial changes between now and then, California will lift its tier system. The CDPH has previewed what that might look like after June 15th, and they said, quote unquote, usual operations. Businesses still must comply with the Cal OSHA standards, and workplaces still must promote policies that reduce risk. So things like keeping doors open, ensuring that our filtration systems on our HVAC are the highest possible level. They're still going to encourage mask wearing indoors or at any other high-risk settings, for example, healthcare. And note, and I put this in ital, like even post lifting of all restrictions, CDPH is going to say that if it's possible and it's not going to impact your business operations, employers should consider allowing remote work. So think of it when an employee comes to you, you have a return to work mandate, and they come to you and say, you know, I've been working at home just fine. I am high risk of COVID side effects. I would like to remain at home. They will point to California Department of Public Health orders, guidance, guidelines, and say, look, you're supposed to allow me to work from home if it's not impacting business operations, and I'm not. So this is something that you'll have to consider, you know, not just, you know, the disability, you know, inquiry, not just is it a reasonable accommodation, but also, you know, the state of California's health guidelines are saying that you should allow employees to work from home so long as it doesn't impact operations. And that's going to be a case-by-case analysis. But just one more thing to put on your to consider list, you know, when employees are coming back and maybe refusing to come back. So here's the magic CalOSHA ETS that I referenced. These have been in effect since November 30th of 2020. It's basically every employer in California except, you know, fully remote, those who are covered by the ATD, which is healthcare usually, or if there's just one employee alone, which is very rare. So these ETS cover, like I said, every single workforce and work site in California. They have been largely or basically identical since November, so through the winter pandemic peak. Now, obviously, things are changing. The CDC has changed their guidance. The California Department of Public Health has changed their guidance. So CalOSHA actually just last Friday issued draft revisions to their ETS. They're going to meet on Thursday to decide whether those will be enacted. They most likely will. If they are implemented, they will go into effect at the same time that California lifts the color tier system. So June 15th, that's a big day, you know, to have on your calendars in terms of, you know, what should we do to reopen and bring employees back. Well, what CalOSHA has previewed is, you know, a lot of things like, you know, if you're fully vaccinated, just like CDC and CDPH say, you don't have to physically distance and wear your face coverings. If you're unvaccinated, CalOSHA says you need to give those employees respirators. So maybe start looking into purchasing bulk N95s. And in certain situations, there's still mandatory testing or even heightened testing for unvaccinated employees. So if there's another reason to add to your calculus of whether we should mandate vaccinations in our workforce or very, very strongly encourage it, it is to allow yourself to get out of some of these fairly stringent and onerous requirements that are in place by the ETS. And even after the color tier system is in effect, these will remain. So regardless of what Governor Newsom says that you can do out in public, if you're a business and you have employees, these will still apply to you for the foreseeable future. And again, you know, CalOSHA has a mandate that employers provide a safe and healthy work environment. Probably not so applicable to office workspaces, but say I'm at a grocery store and I have maskless shoppers coming in, and I don't know if they're actually following the guidance and they're fully vaccinated or not. But I still have an obligation to protect my cashiers and my stockers from potential exposure. And so I'm going to have to require masks and plexiglass and things like that, because as an employer, I have the obligation to protect my employees. So that's the general standard for these ETS is, you know, regardless of what employees might be able to do or the public might be able to do, businesses still have these standards in place for the protection of employees. So again, as you know, much as we would like it to be done, COVID is still here. You know, when you have employees back at work, you have, you know, continuing obligations with respect to how to handle and mitigate continuing impacts. The federal version of paid sick leave expired at the end of last year. If you're under 500 employees, you can still obtain the tax credit associated with providing that leave through September 30th. This is new leave, so if the employee was out sick for a COVID-related reason in 2020, they have a new set of hours that they can use. California also had their own supplemental paid sick leave that expired on December 31st, or so we thought. Surprise. Governor Newsom and their legislature enacted more supplemental paid sick leave on March 29th. But it is, and this also goes through September 30th, but it is retroactive. I'll get into that later. Basically, any employer in California with 25 employees who has an employee call out sick for any one of these reasons, COVID related, either they are sick or they are quarantining, they are getting the vaccine or they're suffering from side effects of the vaccine, they're caring for a family member who's experiencing symptoms or who are isolating, or if the child's school is closed because there is an outbreak at school, not closed in general, then those employees would be entitled to this supplemental paid sick leave. Again, this is new, so if somebody was out sick in 2020, they're going to have this again for 2021. And if anybody took leave for one of those listed reasons between January 1st and the present, they're entitled to that leave. So employers would need to go back and look, oh, did so-and-so call out on January 15th? You know, I might need to retroactively apply this paid sick leave. So this is important because, you know, no matter what the tiers do, no matter what the CDPH does or the CDC does, these paid sick leave laws still apply. And so you're going to continue to need to manage to these. Hopefully case counts are low, community spread is low. Hopefully a large portion, if not all of your employees are fully vaccinated, so the chance of them needing paid sick leave is low. But, you know, this is a continuing obligation. Might still pop up, particularly if kids' schools are shut down for 2 weeks because of close contact, or because you have an employee who is out sick for a couple days after getting their second shot. You know, these are things that employers need to just be aware of when somebody calls out sick. Keep in mind there are also local sick leave ordinances. Here's a list of some. Note that City of San Diego does not have its own standalone COVID supplemental leave, but they are requiring that employers allow employees to take this City of San Diego sick leave for certain COVID related purposes. So in addition to the federal law that I explained, in addition to the California supplemental paid sick leave, any employees that are working in these cities would have an additional layer of paid sick leave. A lot of these can overlap, and you can use one to apply to the other, but just keep in mind that these obligations exist, and for the foreseeable future, at least through the summer, will continue. Keep in mind also, there is a workers' compensation presumption for employees who do contract COVID. So pretty early in the spring last year, Governor Newsom created this presumption via executive order, saying basically if you tested positive for COVID and you had been at work in the last 14 days, we're just going to presume that it's work-related. Employers obviously can present evidence to show the employee was at a barbecue or got it elsewhere. But generally speaking, they'll presume that it's work-related, and therefore the employee is eligible for workers' compensation. This ran through July 5th of 2020, but in September, the legislature decided to codify this executive order, and this is going to apply for several years. So through January 1st of 2023, basically if you are first responders and healthcare workers, which probably won't apply to you, or if you have an employee in any general work site who tests positive during an outbreak, which depends on the size of the business. It's either 4% if it's 100 plus, or 4 people if under 100 test positive. So basically, if you have any employee who comes down with COVID in an outbreak situation, workers' comp will presume that it's work related and will apply workers' compensation there. Note there are also obligations with this legislation to just notify your workers' comp carrier with any case, so that the carrier can determine whether or not there has been an outbreak and should apply the presumption. So this is just one more thing to keep in mind. If somebody comes down with COVID, again, at any time between now and 2023, just make a note of it. I hate to say this, but collect evidence that your employee got it at a party or somewhere else, so that you can rebut the presumption of work relatedness, so this isn't a hit to your workers' comp.
And as a reminder on that, you are allowed to access employees' social media if it is public and not password protected, but you are not allowed to access it if it is password protected. So in my experience, employees who are at barbecues and parties often post that on publicly available social media.
Very good point. So with
Hey,
that,
so you guys, this is Kevin popping in really quick. This is, oh, you know what? I was just gonna say we're running a little over and want to know how many slides. So it looks like I didn't have to say anything.
yeah, I'm 11:15 on the dot.
So yes, first of all, great information. I know there's a lot of information, and I know you can tell I'm not using a real background. My thing just moved. I know this is constantly evolving, and we may end up bringing you guys back to address that. One of the concerns that I have is that, you know, there is a political tint to this, right? And so if you have people in the office that are pushing anti-vaccine and they're sending people emails about, you know, my yoga instructor says this, or the internet, you know, said that Bill Gates is putting a chip. How should we address those people that might be discouraging or lower morale? People may just get upset saying, look, I had to get the vaccine. You know, if you don't want to get it, that's fine, but, you know, keep it to yourself.
Yeah, there's obviously, you know, limitations with, you know, how much you can control what employees are saying, and particularly if it's on their free time, or, you know, their friends on social media and they're posting all sorts of articles from all different sources. You know, I would say that as an employer, you should counter that with, you know, CDC information, scientific handouts, studies. You can have Q&A sessions with your employees and counter it with information about, you know, the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine. If it gets to the point where these kind of anti-vaccine statements and communications are disruptive, then you can do something about it for sure. But I would say, you know, short of that, you know, just to provide the scientific information and the, you know, valid information for your employees to consider.
Also, to the extent that it becomes overtly politicized, remember you actually cannot discriminate against an employee based on their political affiliation.
Yeah, you know, we avoided, because so many people were working from home, we avoided a lot of that during the election, which was probably a nice a side effect for that. So once again, I want to thank you guys a lot. That was such a huge amount of information in a short amount of time. I know we went over a little bit, but that happened. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time out to brief us. This is going to be on our YouTube channel, so you can see the presentation. I want to thank my friends at Ignite Visibility and Alan for sponsoring the series. I did have one question that I also want to know too, right before we leave. So what was the result of the lawsuit on electricity usage? Did they win that? Did they have to pay an extra 15 cents a month?
They actually settled it, so there was no resolution. But as a side note, it was a particularly stupid claim because the employees actually rode in trucks that had chargers in them. So even from a factual perspective, they weren't required to use their home electricity. But it got settled with a bunch of other claims. But I always bring that case up just as an example of the things you can't even think of with the work from home that you could get tagged for.
So again, I think there's going to be a lot of other issues. There is this development of a caste system about, you know, the smart workers get to work from home. I think that we may have to bring you guys back to address some of those issues. But again, I want to thank you very much for taking time out. You can always go to techsd.org to find out more about Tech San Diego and our events. There'll be more events in this series. We have one coming up on best practices on what companies are doing from work from home, from a workplace kind of planning from CBRE. So keep an eye on your emails. Go to techsandiego.org and we'll be ready. Sarah, our marketing manager, am I missing anything?
Nope, we're all good. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you very much, Ashley and Samantha, for taking time out of your morning to join us and give us all that great information.
You're very welcome, and please feel free to reach out to Ashley or I at any time with follow-up questions about this presentation or anything. We both have full labor and employment practices, so we do advice and counsel and litigation about not only obviously return to work and COVID, but just managing your workforce generally, through anything that you may face, and we are happy to help.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and end this webinar then. Thank you.